Hello all and welcome back to another video. This is now part 2 in the CT70 series. If you caught our last video, we attempted to start this bike and had a few issues, and now we're going to come to the point where we're going to strip it all down. So first thing is to get the bike out and on a nice stand. You can see straight away I have spilt oil everywhere, but little issue, so let's move forward. If you didn't manage to catch the last video, I recommend giving that a watch. It gives a good insight into the machine, what's so special about it, and why I really like it. Now, this bike is approximately 50 years old, 54 to be exact, so it's actually in really good condition, and I'm hoping it will come apart relatively well. So I've got some boxes from the supermarket for free to store things and a coffee to get me going. So let's dig straight into this thing and get it torn apart. Of course, with these things you need your tools, so the main tools we're going to be using are an impact gun and 2 socket sets, a larger one for the big bolts and a smaller one for the others. Similar to the first video, the first thing we've got to do is get the fuel out of this machine and get all the fluids out. The oil was drained previously at the end of last video, so I didn't have to faff around with that, but the main thing is fuel to get out. With the fuel out, we can then pull the tank out. It's 2 bolts and it slides out the back of the frame. What you'll notice with this teardown is that I'm going to try and keep everything nice and organised. That's going to involve these clear bags, which can be labelled with bolts and brackets, and then boxes where I can package them all together. The main reason for this is it takes time to get parts refurbished, and I don't want to get to assembly and not have a clue where everything is. Next up comes the carburettor. This is also full of fuel, so taking care not to throw that everywhere. Give it an empty out and wrap it in a tea towel just to keep it protected. I'm not planning on using this carb, but I think I'll get it vapor blasted because it's a lovely original piece of kit. Now, I have no sort of process for tearing this bike down. Although I've done a Z50 build, I haven't done a CT70, and they are quite different in the way they're put together, but I'm going with logic, so kind of working top down. We've got the seat off. I'm going to work on this rear bracket and then move my way to the rear fender. I feel with all these builds it's easy to guess and think about the best way to do it, but sometimes you've just got to get stuck in. As long as there's some method to the madness, I think you'll be okay. But what I found was a lot of the bolts were quite rusty, so going around and giving them a good squirt of WD-40 or some penetrant a few hours before is a big help. With that rear fender off, I was pleasantly surprised to find it in really good condition. As mentioned before, these fenders are rare to the silver tag model and was something that I wanted to keep completely original, so knowing they're in good nick is a good sign and means that with some small body work we can get them re-chromed and they'll be looking like new. Next up is the exhaust system, and this is one of the things on the bike that's taken a bit of a battering. It's heavily dented inwards and has obviously seen a little bit of abuse, but we pull that off, and with some of these things they won't be getting reused, as I'm going to do some small, hopefully tasteful modifications. Things like the exhaust will get replaced with a very nice aftermarket system, looking the same hopefully, but giving it a bit of performance so I can actually really enjoy this thing on the road. And I have to emphasise, all the things that will be changed are things that can be changed straight back. I will be restoring parts that are original to the bike and keeping them in a box to the side, so if I ever decide to put this thing back to its full original self, that is very easily done. Moving forward with the teardown, we look at this rear brake system, and it's more complex than others purely for the reason that there's a hand operated rear brake as well as a foot brake, so you've got 2 actuation points going to this, but comes apart quite nicely. Obviously on my previous Z50 build I had to cut the brake lever off, so having this slide apart is actually really nice. But we continue just pulling this apart, bagging it up as we go and labelling it, so when I come to reassemble it's nice and easy. And what I can see from this bike is that one of the things that is the worst perished or most damaged are all of the cables. They're extremely brittle and they are all cracking, so this is one thing that I'll definitely be replacing. So the rear left hand side cable comes off, and then we move to the front brake. But you can see straight away they're all cracked and corroded, so that's something that I definitely want to be replacing. Now up at the top of the bike on the handlebars, we're going to get these bars stripped down and taken off. First thing for me is to get rid of the grips so I can get access to that throttle. Bit of a shame to cut the grips, but these are easily replaceable and you can buy Honda ones still, so no big issue cutting them off, and it's much easier, especially when glue's been sitting for 50 years or so. It does get quite tough. But the throttle slides off. This is identical on all the Z50 and 70 models, so I'm familiar with this now and it's no issue tearing it apart. Along with these cables that are heavily perished, there are also grommets in the handlebars that pass the cables through, and once again, being a rubber item that sat out in the sun, cold, rain for however many years, these do go very brittle and tend to crack. So you'll see as I pull them apart, they literally do just break, and I'm not being too careful as I just want to get them out. Moving over to the front end, you can see someone has had the fun job of taping this headlight back together. It's obviously had a shunt at some point and done some nice damage, so we pull that off and the headlight bowl is literally collapsing under its own weight. So we pop all the connectors out, some are very stiff as you can see here, and we get that headlight off. And to a nice surprise, this is one of the things that actually looks quite reusable. It's nice to have an original headlight, and more importantly it's got the original trim around the outside. So I'm hoping under closer inspection with some cleaning and potentially a rechrome, this is something that can go straight back on the bike, which will be a really nice touch, as I do want to keep those main features, chrome parts, all original and put back on. And you may be thinking, if the cables are perished and the grommets, what is the wiring system going to be like? And I can confirm it is pretty stiff in places. You can see where the harness is sat, it's almost baked into position. A lot of the terminals seemed very brittle and a lot of the wires were very frayed. So I work on tidying up that headlight, pulling it off and getting it out of the way so I can get better access to that harness. As you can see, we've managed to wrangle off that headlight bucket, and inside the bucket is the speedo which is built in, and this is a lovely piece of kit. Very nice dial and something once again that I want to reuse. So delicately prise that out of the cracked housing and we have a closer look, and you can see it's really nice. A cool Japanese piece of engineering that will definitely refurbish and put back onto the machine. At this point now, we're making some good progress with the teardown. The handlebars come off, and to my surprise these were actually free and able to unscrew. This is normally the first point on these bikes that seizes up, so it was a pleasant surprise to know that they were free and moving. Along with that, the front fender, we get that off. This will go off to the body shop to be shaped and repaired. There's a small crack that needs welding, and then it will get re-chromed. At this point I thought it was a good time to tackle the wiring system and gut the frame, so we're just left with mechanical parts. It's not a very complex system, but it's a lot more complex than the 50cc. So you can see the harness passes from the rear of the chassis out through the front of a grommet, or a grommet where it used to be, and comes out of this side exit here. So we pull that out and get that all out of the way and move on to the chain. This is probably the most rusted part on the bike, which for me is a good sign, because if anything else was rusted more, that would be much more of a bigger issue. A chain's very cheap and easily replaced. Onto the wheels. At the front end we have a speedo built into the front wheel along with the drum brake. Everything's free moving, and I feel like a light coat of oil that was obviously put on the machine at some point has helped a lot. So we undo those cables, and once again the bolt slides straight out of the front axle. So for a bike of this age, once again, it's another thing that amazes me that it's coming apart so easily, which is a very good thing for me. With the front wheel off, we rejig the frame and then have a quick tidy up. It's nice to keep tidy when stripping these things down, otherwise you end up with parts everywhere. And Next thing I want to get off is quite a unique part to this bike, and one that I really like, and that is the cradle on the frame. So for the European models, they never came with these, and they only come on American bikes, and that's part of the reason I really like this bike, because I think it just finishes a thing off. When you see them without it, it looks completely different and nowhere near as good. We now have the heart of the bike out, that 70cc engine, and the whole thing is a load easier to move around, and you can see we can throw it straight on the stand and move over to this rear end and get this rear axle out. And this one proved to be a lot stiffer than the front axle. I don't think these come out as often, and you can see the axle was pretty grimy, so definitely wanted to stick in there and be a pain to get out. One thing I did miss, which you can see here, is the rear brake stay for the drum brake. I forgot to take that off, and that caught me out, but a quick bolt, 10mm bolt, and that is free. We're now really getting down to the last bits of the bike. We've got the rear shocks to come off with these blue covers that are paint matched to the frame. They look great and will be saved again. And then we've got the swing arm. Another item on a lot of bikes, people find that these swing arm bolts rust into place, especially when they don't move, but this one seemed okay, and I think because of the low mileage it really hadn't worn too much, which is a very good thing. With rear suspension off the bike, we flip over to the front end and try and get these forks apart. Identical system to the 50cc. Obviously this is much earlier, so was the first to accommodate it, but you've got two top bolts and then this middle headset bolt. And you can see there, I nearly dropped the forks. They slid straight out, and then I spent 10 minutes picking up ball bearings, because these are cageless headsets, but when we buy replacements they will be in a cage, which makes this job 10 times easier. And one of the final jobs for the forks is to undo the cups that hold the lowers in and slide these out. And once again, being a low mileage bike, all of the bushings and springs were all in really nice condition. The grommets, obviously being rubber, are heavily perished, but apart from that they look good. And to finish them off, so we can send these off for paint, we pull the reflectors off the side. And now time for a quick overview of what parts we have. We have the forks here as one unit or two lowers, and we'll strip these down after. In this box we've got miscellaneous larger parts. We've got the seat, which will need a new cover and foam. We've got our cradle and some other chrome pieces. Over here we've got the swing arm. I've left the bolts on so I can bag those up, and you can see this is in pretty good condition. In this box we've got some broken parts and things that won't be reused. Very stiff and brittle electrical parts, broken cables, and an old dented exhaust. And here's the money, the good stuff. We have the engine, which will be going for a full strip down and rebuild, and the frame and wheels, which will get stripped and painted in the original paint code, which I think is Candy Sapphire Blue. Few last bits to pull off it and to bag some bolts up, but that will be ready to go, and yeah, get some fresh paint and a rebuild on it. So guys, I really hope you enjoyed that video of getting this bike stripped down. Now that it's all apart, as mentioned, we're going to get these all sent off to different suppliers. That's going to be painters, zinc platers, chromers, and we're going to get all the parts sent off, long lead time stuff, so we can have a good time reassembling it. But that brings us to the end of today's video. Really hope you enjoyed it. Take it easy, and I'll catch you in the next one.